So I really struggled with this presentation. I put a few slides together based on a few things I've probably used before and, you know, regurgitated a few other times. And then I really struggled with what I had put together. And I thought to myself, this isn't really what makes firms soar in lean. You know, what is the difference between the company that just sort of dabbles in it, applies a few tools, goes kind of nicely for a while, versus the firm that really stays relevant and competes in a very tough environment? I mean, we've got a whole other world that's erupting out there. So how do we stay relevant and do new stuff? And I have been doing this for about, I suppose, 2 decades now. And the downside of that is that you also get a little bit stuck in your own thinking. So it's hard to extract your reflections. What did you learn? What did you bump your heads with? And you know, what can you do with that information? So I'm going to show you a couple of things which are kind of standard and, you know, make sense. And if you do them, you'll have a more elegant transformation of your organization and things might move a bit more cleanly. But towards the end of the presentation, I want to show you what I think makes the real difference in a good lean transformation. I'm hoping I can take you along for that journey. But before we start, I would love just to understand who I'm talking to. And I was lucky enough to chat to a few of you over breakfast. And then I got very worried because everybody there was from Toyota. And you know, then I said, oh, well, are you the only ladies here from Toyota? No, that table over there are also from Toyota. So that really did make my job tough this morning because I consider Toyota to be a really good benchmark for what good leadership looks like. So, you know, who am I to come and present to the Toyota people? But it was quite enlightening. I was told by all of them in no uncertain terms, please don't talk about A3s. So I've just kidding. Seems like I've had a lot of A3s in the past. So it would be nice to just understand, even just by a show of hands, how many of you have dabbled and done, read about, done something in lean thinking before? Okay, so 4 or 5 hands. The rest of you? No. Okay, so this is something new. Okay, that's also you?
Government sector, water production.
Water production. Okay, all right.
So we would love to implement lean, but it's not always feasible in the environment we work in.
Okay, that is quite different also.
Yes.
And perhaps could be some pioneering work also
And
for
it
lean.
would be good to implement it, but
Yeah.
it's challenges on a whole different scale.
Okay, understood. We do a lot of work in public sector. I feel your pain. Okay, it's a very different animal, you know, when you're talking public versus private, because one of the things I'll talk about today is what is the purpose of your organization? Why do you exist? And that also helps you to inform the kind of things you need to change in the business. And public versus private, you're sort of chasing different things, so it can be interesting. For those of you who have dabbled in it, how did it go? Good stuff? Not so good? Tough? Easy? Worked? Didn't work? What would you say?
Very difficult.
Very difficult. Okay. And why do you say that? What stands out for you as being a really hard part of it?
Having worked at Toyota, I understand what the goal is you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Trying to get that picture across to other people
Okay.
as a consultant,
Yeah.
very difficult.
Yeah.
So it's those steps on how you actually progress to where you want them to be, very difficult.
All right. There's nothing easy about it. And if anybody does say it is easy, then, you know, perhaps you just got lucky either. Or perhaps there's a little bit more to it. You know, there's quite a bit of meat that sits behind becoming a lean organization. Belt manufacturing, you've been dabbling in it for quite a few years.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience. I was fortunate to have been at Toyota for 5 years
All right.
and lived within it, so I don't need to be convinced and I was very fortunate to have worked within teams. We were called the Kaizen Supplier Support Group. And we used
Okay.
to work with suppliers on
Yeah.
improving their systems.
Oh, fabulous.
So I think, again, I'm in an environment where no one has come from that environment. So quite frankly, I've spent the last 10 years or so setting the foundation.
Yeah.
So even simple things like making sure there's ABET training within our company.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that people understand the numeracy and literacy, you know, so they can put up graphs that they
Yeah.
understand.
Helping them with those basics.
And then also the concepts and getting people to understand that.
Yeah.
So that's quite difficult because, and then also within a car industry, you have sort of a number of models where sometimes there's different complexities in your own environment
Okay.
and different excuses.
Different excuses. Okay, fair enough. But I mean, that's also, I just want to link to that because there's a lot of literature out there, and you know, if you go onto Lean Post or Planet Lean, which are places that we contribute to with our articles, there's a lot of stuff out there telling people this stuff works and it can work in any environment, and you know, it's really good. But this whole idea of let's copy what we see at Toyota or at any other good organization and paste it into our own organization is a very tough route to take, because your challenges are unique, your situation is unique, and we need to be cognizant of that. So I do believe that there's a very important step that you need to take right in the beginning, and you'll see one of my bullet points here is no problem is problem. And part of that is, what do we understand to be the problem for our particular organization, and therefore what do we need to get across. But there's no doubt in my mind that because Lean is about engaging everybody to help and contribute their ideas to making things better in the company, how do you bring all of those people on board to sort of think in the same way? Not so easy. Okay. So there definitely are examples where some companies spectacularly fail at Lean, sorry to say it, versus some companies that are seeming to soar and do really well. And I'm hoping we can explore that today. So the kind of lessons I want to go through, I just want to first talk about, you know, why are we actually doing Lean and why bother? And what is your view on that? Then we'll talk about the problem with no problem. And then I'm going to spill some lean beans for you. And let's see where that goes. I just want to put a few things out there. I'm not saying this is a concise list and if you do all of these things, this is perfection. But I just want to get you thinking so that when we get to the question session, we can really talk about it. And then the last point here is just my view. Acid test. In my view, what do I consider to be the acid test for Lean? And you'll either love it or you won't. Let's see how that goes. Okay, so why do it? What's the point of actually going Lean and trying these things? So there's a lot of good reasons out there. You know, if you speak to companies, they say, you know, we want to improve, we want to be more competitive, we want to stay relevant, we want to survive, we want to have better service delivery. You know, there's a lot of reasons why we do it. We want to be competitive, cost, quality, delivery, service. All these things start to come up in our vocabulary. But what's the real essence of Lean? Is it that? You're shaking your head? I'd love to hear.
We need to make money.
We need to make money?
Correct.
Yeah.
You need to get rid of waste, and you need to be productive in what you do, because that's your primary purpose.
Yeah.
To get what you need, what are you making, and to get it as fast as you can,
Yeah.
to make money in it, so that you can improve the quality of your staff and your company by making money.
Okay, so there's very much in the commercial environment, there's this whole thing, we have to make money, we need to get better profit, maximizing profit. And how do we do that? We look at our operations, we take out the waste, we make things run better. And ultimately that'll improve the costs, and we'll get more business from customers who are happier with us. But there is more to it. And I put this little comment at the bottom: is the maximum profit the goal, or is this a means to a greater end? And what is the true promise that Lean can actually bring for you? So I'm kind of hoping that we can see this as, yes, we're doing this because we need to improve as an organization, but there's something else sitting there that if you can figure that part out, it'll help you to soar versus just kind of dabble in it. I quite like this diagram just because it even reminds me sometimes of the types of things I need to look at in our own organization or in other organizations. And I like the heading that I've stuck there, which says no problem is problem, because what I've found is that in a lot of cases, we're not entirely sure what we're trying to fix. We're not entirely sure what it is we're trying to do as a business, so we don't articulate in a way that everybody can understand what the problem is that we need to solve. And if we haven't got that part right, the rest gets really difficult. Then what behaviors are necessary? What will help us solve the particular problem? What's the work to be done? What does our process look like? A lot of things get a little fuzzy. So I urge you, if you're wanting to lead Lean, first try and understand where to start. And bearing in mind that if we haven't got a clear idea of what the problem is, that is a problem. And that's already going to hinder you for the rest of the process. I also like the questions that are asked here. If you understand the problem you want to solve, what's the process of how you deliver to your customers? What does it look like? And what are the issues that are preventing you from being great? But of course, we've got people. We all have people who work in our organizations. So in order to solve the problem, in order to deliver on our purpose as a company, what is the capability we need in-house? What must people get good at? And what are the behaviors you need to see people doing every day, every week, every month? What are the routines we need to help them put in place that's going to drive a particular culture? And ultimately then, if you get those things right, your spin-off would be better profitability, better competitiveness, better service delivery. So I just like this. I'd like this to sit with you as a reminder of the types of things that you're trying to understand when you're leading lean in an organization. We'll come back to some of these elements just now. So no problem is problem. And once you've articulated it, sometimes your problem is this giant big challenge of how you're going to move from where you are to where you need to be. But you're also dealing with people, and people are sensitive creatures. So you don't want to overwhelm them with this big picture, like in 3, 5, 10 years' time, we want to be there. You want to take that challenge and you want to divide it up into bite-sized chunks that they can digest and help them understand where they currently are, help them see where's their next target condition that they want to move towards, but ideally it should be taking you in the direction of the vision for the company. So you also want to lead lean in such a way that you're helping people understand the problem in little episodes, okay? Because what you've got is you've got people who are learning and they're bumping their heads along the way. Let's say you want to make a change in the business or change in your process or HR or IR, you want to take people on board and let them see that there's a different way of working. They've got their current threshold of knowledge, what they understand today in terms of their own experiences. So we can't expect those people to already be thinking like that. You've got to let them bump their heads, learn, move forward. Bump their heads, learn, move forward. And in that way, you take them along this path, this learning path. And as a lean leader, you've got to respect that everybody has a different learning path that they're on as well. You can't expect everyone to be where you're at or where you're thinking. Okay. There's a lot of things I can say about that diagram, but let's move on. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to spill some beans here, which is really what I'm showing you in the next few slides. It's just where I've personally bumped my head quite a lot over the years. And so I'm giving you a handful of little techniques and things that you can think about, which could, as I've mentioned before, make your lean change more elegant. But it's not the be-all and end-all. So no problem is the first secret I want to share. Try and figure it out. Where's your business going? What are your customers saying is not right? What are your employees saying needs to change? How are you going to become a more sustainable company? And what are the handful of things that you need to get better at over the short, medium, and long term? Articulate the problem. Make it measurable. Make it digestible to your people. Okay. When you've got that, it's easier to get people sort of thinking in a similar direction. So you take them from everybody's on their own mission, everyone's in their own direction, everyone's chasing their own problem, versus now we're all understanding the problem in a similar way. And we're collaborating to solve things that are a common goal. So you're aligning people towards this common goal. And I shouldn't say it's too loud, but there definitely is a need for improving the bottom line and the top line performance. And why do I say that? Because shareholders want it, your leaders expect it, and ultimately you'll see my last slides is very much saying the opposite of this. But it is our reality that people do expect us to improve and change in order to change the finances of the business, the sustainability of the business. You've got to be able to also show the financial benefits. However, it cannot be your primary focus. Because the minute you do that, then sometimes you actually end up making changes or making improvements in the business which go against customer satisfaction, which go against building employee morale and their engagement. So yes, results are important. I will not disagree with that, but just be cautious of it. And also just a final point on this one here is I like this guy's statement where I often joke about the critical few hundred. You also want to distill the things you're trying to change in the business to just a handful of things. Again, making it digestible for people to cope with. All right. So as lean leader, you've got to help frame the problems in such a way that people can cope. All right. Secret 2, I struggle to talk about this in a very quick way because there's so much to this, but I found personally it helps me to think about an organization in 3 distinct levels, where you've got your strategic focus, you've got your systemic level, which crosses borders into different departments like HR, manufacturing, quality, etc. And then a situational level, which is essentially your frontline operations, the people who are really delivering value for your customers. And when you're thinking lean and lean improvement, you want to also make sure that you're targeting it at all 3 levels and that the 3 levels are talking to each other. So maybe a quick way to describe it, where's where's the organization going? What are the market's objectives and values? What are we trying to be good at? What do we need to ensure is happening at the systems level, that things are flowing from the time an order is placed up until the time we deliver whatever product or service to the customer? And what are our guys doing on the front line? What are they doing every single day that's contributing to that? Because I find sometimes we say, let's do lean. Right, we want everybody in the organization to be empowered. I want you, and you doing problem solving. Let's go. And then people on the floor, they're actually pretty easy to motivate. They love making changes. They love making improvements. Yeah, you'll hit some resistance here and there for sure. But once you get them making improvements, if you don't help them to blow away the barriers that are stopping them from improving further and further, they just become demotivated, they get irritated, they get frustrated, and they abandon ship. So you might mobilize your staff to make changes, but if you're not also mobilizing your value stream, your systemic level, the minute these guys hit a snag, it's going to just end there. You've got to be able to support them. And also, if what you've decided strategically is important to the business and you're not cascading that down to what everybody's doing every single day, then you're going to have a disconnect between those levels. So what I'm suggesting here is just remember you've got 3 levels in the organization. If you're trying to change something, make sure that change is cascading nicely throughout all 3 levels. And not just sort of targeting bits and pieces of it, because that's when things tend to also fall apart. And in that way, what you start to achieve is connecting the strategy of where you're going as an organization with what Joe Soap is doing at the front line with your customer, that the two match and aren't fighting each other. Okay. So it's a busy slide, but this can expand into many, many different things. It could be how you cascade your goals down and how you feed back. It could be how you design your visuals and how you expose problems on a daily basis and how you deal with that. Is it matching? It could also be how you're linking projects between what that guy's working on in his little department or his team and how well that's contributing to the bigger picture of what you're trying to change in the organization. Secret 3 is try not to be a toolhead. Okay. I've been a toolhead in the past. I'm a great toolhead, actually. With an engineering background, I can't help myself. Give me a tool. I love it. I want to run with it. But the problem with this, and why I've shown you the chicken and egg story here, is that you do need tools to understand your problem. So yeah, you might use a value stream map to map your process from the time an order is placed until the time the cash is in the bank, and then you'll find all the problems and the wastes along the way. But to just go in and say, well, here's a list of lean tools. Let's do this blanket approach, tick box exercise where we're going to implement blah, 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 blah. If we do these things, we will be lean. That's kind of the copy and paste problem that I mentioned earlier. So it's a chicken and egg. You do need a tool to sometimes understand the problem and to analyze, but be very cautious about which tools you decide to implement. You don't want to implement 5S throughout the organization where people are putting yellow tape around their staplers. Okay? Has anybody seen that? I actually think a few years ago I asked someone to do that. So you live, you learn. You want to know that you're implementing 5S with a purpose. There's a reason for doing it. So for example, in a tire manufacturing company, they were having severe quality issues because of contamination in the batches. So it helped them to improve their 5S condition of certain areas by making things more clean and organized, and things were in the right place. And they were dealing with the problems as they were arising. And as a result, the implementation of 5S was helping them to improve a quality output, a quality metric. And that was a good reason for doing 5S. So don't be a toolhead. Choose your tools with purpose and have a reason for selecting them. Don't just, think if you implement them, it'll make you lean. What it will do is if you just implement in that way, it creates more waste and more activities that are perhaps not of value to your customer. So that's where lean can become very unlean. All right. So you can see there's a bunch of tools out there, loads of things that you can, practice with, but just be cautious. So let's not be a toolhead. Think about what problem you're trying to solve, and if you have to use a tool to understand the problem, fair enough, because a value stream map is great for helping to expose issues, helps people understand the process in a similar way, gets people to grips with, let's understand the problem in the same way, and helps them to collaborate. But then once you understand the problem, then you can pick and choose from your list of things that could help potentially improve the performance. And perhaps then 5S could be of value. So just know why. And if someone says to you, let's implement this, be very strict with them and say, why are we doing it? What's the purpose of it? What outcome are we trying to expect from this? My fourth secret is a lot of people have said to me, oh, we don't have the culture in this organization for problem solving. Oh, this is the wrong culture, and if we could change the culture, we could improve our organization. I say culture can be changed. I also say it's not easy, and it does take time. I mean, Andrew, you've been at it for a decade, you said. So I liked what you said, because you said in a decade, you just laid the foundations. And that, I think, is quite realistic, what Andrew's saying there. It takes many, many years in order to shift a culture from your current condition of mindsets and where you know, sort of traditional management style to where you want to be with a sort of a future leader approach. And the way in which to do this, I love this formula, because you know you don't often see formulae in this context. But in David Mann's book, he said, there's a formula for culture, and culture is the sum of the individual habits. And I kind of latched onto that because I liked it. And I thought to myself, well, if you wanted to change the culture in the organization, you need to change the behaviors of the individuals. And if you can change the behaviors of the bulk of the individuals, you can influence the overriding culture in the organization. So what's the trick is, what's your purpose, where are you going, what problem you're trying to solve, what are your KPIs, but what are your KBIs? What are your key performance indicators, but what are your key behavioral indicators? And what do you need people to be doing differently in order to encourage a culture for problem solving and learning? I'm talking very academically, I understand, it's just because of time, but just think about that. If you want to shift the culture, what habits would you like to see happening more often? And how do you encourage that? And often you can encourage behaviors by bringing in certain routines. So you're looking for people to do certain things on a daily basis, a weekly basis. We spoke about A3s around breakfast, and we had quite an animated discussion about it, because I asked the question, do you do your A3s? Yes, we've done hundreds of A3s. We do them for everything. And, but A3 is a tool that, yes, you are, you're summarizing your thoughts around a particular problem, and you're putting it in a visual format. But what you're essentially doing is you're following a very specific thought process while you're doing that. It is a PDCA process, so you're understanding your current condition, your target condition, you're trying to understand the causes of the issue, you're putting down in place some countermeasures, things that you can go and try and experiment with the outcome of hopefully improving your current condition. So you use the tool to help structure your thinking, to put it down on paper, so that eventually it becomes second nature. Eventually you won't even need an A3 piece of paper to help you do it. It'll just sort of come naturally. So if that's the behavior you're looking for, that you want people to follow through their problem solving right to the end without giving up part way, you ask them to complete an A3 in order to drive that thinking. And the thinking will turn into practice, which will turn into new behaviors, which will turn into second nature. Okay, so you can help people to act their way into a better way of thinking. A lot of lean implementations fail. A lot of them go wrong. And a lot of them don't work out as expected either. I've met too many people that have started lean implementations and have sort of either given up part way, or they've thrown their arms in the air and said, oh, this stuff doesn't work. It's quite sad to see it, really. But I do believe that sustainability is possible, and potentially one of Toyota's most amazing qualities is their capacity for problem solving, and the way in which they're able to get everybody contributing their ideas every day in a meaningful way. And part of that is this PDCA thinking. Who of you are using PDCA or have used it? Okay, in the context of? What?
Training in it, but also as Toyota, it's second nature.
Yeah.
We do it all the time, every day.
Okay, so you do it all the time, every day. Why? Why would Toyota be pushing this so hard? What's the reason?
It almost drives your way of thinking.
Yeah.
And it forces you down this channel. But
Yeah.
if that becomes second nature, then I think a lot of the problem solving just naturally gets sorted
Yeah.
out. Because I see that when I put a guy on a course, he takes it and he runs with it and skips out that vital part,
Yeah.
is that process.
Yeah.
If you're jumping ahead and you're trying to solve the problem within a fishbone diagram,
Yeah.
you're not gonna solve the problem.
Yeah, or you might solve it and then it comes back and bites you on the backside again. It recurs. So, I mean, PDCA, we see a lot of PD going on, a lot of planning and doing. So I plan this thing, something's going wrong, let me do something about it. And then the next mushroom pops up that I've got to go and divert my attention to. So I've planned and done that one. And while I'm planning and doing this one's starting to fall apart. This one's starting to go backwards. We did that once, the change, it worked for a while, but then it didn't work, so, we abandoned ship. So, and that happens regularly, that happens a lot. So I'm of the view that if we did go through the pain and suffering of completing the whole cycle every single time, you really would put yourself in a position where things would stick, where they would sustain. And sustaining means I've planned it, I've done it, but have I checked that it actually worked? Did it actually give me the result that was expected? What did the experiment teach me? What did I learn? Did it work? Great. How am I going to keep this thing going? It didn't work? Okay, what am I going to do differently? What will I try and do differently until I get to the outcome I want? So it's this whole idea of doing experiments over and over again, but following through right to the end so that things don't fall apart and you don't keep dealing with the same problems over and over again. How many of you feel that you're dealing with recurring problems? If you have that experience, and that's what it feels like, then possibly things are improving but not sustaining. Possibly you've got to think about how do we instill this completing of the PDCA cycle. You might be trying to fix this massive problem of losing customer contracts. And when you dig into the problem, you find that a lot of the reason for it is because of 30% rejects. So people are unhappy with that. Then you dig into the rejects and you see that there's particular causes, 3 or 4 things that are more often than not going wrong with the product. And then you dig into that and you start to do projects to improve it. So if you think about these as little circles, there's a little project on a PDCA cycle on improving the quality, which contributes to the overall 30%, which contributes to the lost contracts. So you can see there's these nested cycles of PDCA taking place. And that's quite an important concept, because if you just want people to work on stuff and work on projects, but you can't see how the result of that is leading to the bigger picture, then you've got that disconnect in the 3S model I was talking to you about. So I say, Deming, I love it. I'm just going to turn it on its side, if you don't mind. And let's just make sure that whatever we've decided to change strategically, not only are we following through on PDCA, but then the mini projects we're doing in the divisions and the departments match to that. And if I improve this, it contributes to that bigger circle. And the team that's working on this particular problem is also overlapping. And when they fix it, it'll contribute to the bigger picture. So try and find the connections between your mini projects and your big projects and make sure they're all going through PDCA. That, in my mind, and this is just my opinion, is what can really help sustain change. Without that, things just fall flat over and over again. And it's frustrating. I've only got 7 secrets, by the way. We're almost there. You're probably worried, how many secrets has she got? Like 30. I do, but I can't show you them all. This was a very basic thing I just want to share with you, which I also think is quite handy to know. It's important that we do make breakthrough change. So when you look at a big value stream and you analyze all the problems, you'll probably come up with some really hard-hitting, great stuff that you can change, and you can make leaps in performance in something. And that would be essentially what we call a breakthrough change. You look at long-term trends, you use tools, you put focus teams on it, you spend months on it sometimes. Even Six Sigma projects could give you those types of breakthrough changes. But those also tend to fall apart and go backwards unless you do something else. And I'm a strong believer that you need a combination of big breakthrough projects that can help you really lift your performance, but then you've got to put in these little systems that give you small day-to-day changes. And small day-to-day sort of probes that are checking how's it going, so that when things do go wrong, you're able to adjust and fix on a regular basis. And it's the combo of those two that helps you sort of over a period of time really improve your performance. The absence of this, usually the graph will go leap in performance, uh-oh. Leap in performance, uh-oh. But that continuous day-to-day practice is what's going to hold it up and give it the legs that it needs. So think about that with your own improvements. Are we making breakthroughs where we really are trying to be quite innovative in what we're doing? But also, what are we doing on a day-to-day basis to ensure that people are learning continuously and also holding up the performance as it starts to drop. Small example, I do a lot of work in hospitals, so even though my background is manufacturing, I grew up in a factory. My dad had a factory, so from the age of 12, I was making coffee, doing wages, admin, and I eventually was promoted to operator. And my heart and soul is in manufacturing, but recently in the last 5 or 6 years, I've been working very hard in healthcare, particularly public healthcare, to try and make a change there. And it was amazing because we were able to look at the value stream from the time the patient arrived at the hospital right up until the time you get discharged and you go get your meds. And I don't know how many of you have been through a public system, but it is a painful, laborious process. And you know, you even worry about picking up other germs while you're waiting in the queues, you know. And they came up with value stream maps to show breakthrough changes, and they made phenomenal improvements, up to 86% reduction in waiting times, which is phenomenal. But that started to slip very quickly until they started putting day-to-day practices in place where people would monitor what time are the doctors coming in, what time is the clinic opening, is the 5S done in the consulting room, are all the pieces of equipment ready to roll when the doctor gets there. There were a lot of basic things they needed to do on a day-to-day basis which would hold up those waiting times. And I'm pleased to say we've got some examples of where now this is working. But there's a third element for the winning combo. So breakthrough, day-to-day, but also developing that human capability for problem solving and developing your executives and your leaderships in how they're supporting that. And I say support. The biggest role a leader can play is teaching and supporting when things go wrong. You keep doing that and you'll be able to get this winning combo. Secret 7, the last one I want to mention. And this one here is where I say lean is great, but try and think of lean in terms of the word learn rather, because that is the essence of what you're ultimately trying to do with lean thinking. I've got 3 or 4 slides here. I want you to, I'm being very academic here, I'm actually thrusting this down your throat. I'm saying to you, lean is a cognitive revolution. It's about transforming yourself before you transform the organization. It's about looking at how you learn, how you think before you expect results. And Toyota have been brilliant. I mean, they've been one of the most stable examples of lean improvement for anybody to work from. And they've got this what we call near seamless flow from the order until delivery. But what they've really managed to achieve is also a seamless flow of ideas coming from their people every single day, and giving them the structure and the time and the space in order to create that. So I believe, my personal view is the capacity for learning and problem solving that takes a good company and makes them great and helps you to soar. So you can do all those other things I showed you and that'll help. But if you can first understand how do we learn in our organization and how do we create a learning organization, that is the real deal. So if you can see lean as more of a strategic learning system than just a bunch of tools or package, you'll start to see it differently. And what does that mean? It means first, as a leader, helping people to understand what their problem is, so seeing their problems and seeing the important stuff. So making sure that they're working on the right things. Help them learn, but also make change and improvement a part of their job. So Toyota, we often talk about the 2 hats, you know, the one hat where I do the job and I run the operations or I do what needs to be done day to day, but the other part of my work is where I'm expected to make improvements on a daily basis and support my team. So commit rather to a learning curve than to bunches and bunches of action plans and lists and things that people must do, which is very much a command and control, traditional thinking kind of management style, versus a learning style, asking questions, humble inquiry, trying to understand what it is we need to learn in order to solve the problem. And that's how you start to reap the real benefits. So how do you build a system? How do you think about the system in your own organization that helps you, helps people learn in the context of this bigger problem you're trying to solve? How do you help them be better than yesterday? How do we help them think about how can we be better tomorrow than today? So true learning isn't doing what you already know better. It's removing yourself from that really dangerous comfort zone, which I have found myself in time and again. And it's discovering what you need to learn. in order to move forward. So what do I know? What do I need to know? what must I learn to understand the problems better? As a lean leader, how do we become teachers? So how do you become a teacher who helps your team think differently? First, you've got to create a space for them to do this in. How do you engineer the learning system? Who's going to learn? What are they going to learn? And whom they're going to learn from? It's quite an important element of that design. How do you let them make mistakes in a safe environment? Meaning safe for themselves, that they don't lose confidence, that they don't create safety issues, that they don't mess things up with the customer. But where you're allowing them to perform experiments using PDCA thinking on a regular basis, and they know they have the opportunity to try. So you're allowing mistakes. I always say to my team, guys, it's okay when things go wrong. It's not okay when the same things go wrong all the time. Now that's a problem. Okay. So you allow mistakes, but not recurring mistakes is quite an important aspect of it. And being tough on problems, but not tough on your people. So yeah, I've already mentioned that. The last point is quite important, but it's about lean is really the essence of it, is about extracting the human creativity, but in a safe environment. Okay, this is the last one of the 7 secrets. I just like the summary. There's a lot of negative words on here, can't. But you can't force people to have ideas. You can't tell them what kind of ideas they must have. You can only help them think. You can only ask questions to get them to move in a certain direction, moving their threshold of knowledge. You can't avoid error if you want to learn. You can't say, oh my word, this is... I mean, I was raised in an environment where it was bad to make mistakes. I mean, if I made a mistake, I get into trouble with my dad, right? So I was raised in that way. So it's been quite a difficult thought process change for me, where I'm now allowed to make mistakes, and it's okay not to have all the answers. I've got an 8-year-old daughter. I'm explaining it to her all the time. It's okay, try, see what happens. Oh, you know, okay, but then you protect her from things going too wrong. And you can't expect people to improve if you don't create the space for them to try. So I think I've spoken too much now. I'm going to end off. I just want to end off with an example of a really spectacular guy. This is a CEO of a hospital, a public hospital in Krugersdorp. It's a smallish hospital. And I visited them for the first time about 5 years ago, and people were basically yelling at me saying, don't bring lean here, we're not interested. Until you invest in more facilities, I need more equipment and give me more people, I'm not interested. That's what they said to me. To the extent where today you want to see the transformation in this place. And the reason for it is this guy. And this is his office, by the way, and in the background he's busy pointing to the green stuff as all the strategic objectives that he's working on with his hospital. Over here is his personal A3. He actually assesses himself in terms of certain lean leader styles, his willingness to change, his humility as a leader, you know, his curiosity and how he goes about asking questions, his perseverance and sticking to, you know, his PDCA cycles himself. And his discipline, self-discipline. He visits the floor, he visits the hospital floor every Monday. You can't get him for a meeting. He's walking the floor, he's talking to people, he's asking them how he can support. He's asking them what issues they're having for the day. And this guy's really visible, he's consistent, so he's always doing it. And he's probably one of the best leaders I have ever met. To the extent where, yes, reduction of 86% in waiting time, and a reduction of neonatal deaths by 80%. Now, if that isn't changing lives, and if that isn't sort of soulful, I don't know what is. So yes, the results are coming, but imagine the impact on people's lives when he's helping them to learn, he's helping them to solve their issues. And he believes, and he practices this, that you've got to start with yourself, and that's why he measures himself. He's even got a buddy, a colleague, who comes and tells him when he's not behaving in the way that he should be. So he's got sort of a conscience person that helps him out with that stuff. So he's basically enabled these people to solve problems every day. And my acid test, and I think he's a good example of this, is the acid test for good lean implementation is, are things getting better? Are lives changing? How do I feel coming to work? In his case, he's saving lives. And if you have those two things, you're certainly on the right track.